An amazing millionaire discovered a humble cleaner's incredible act of love for her sick mom. Jacob stood at the entrance of the old diner, the clatter of dishes mingling with the rich aroma of coffee and pancakes. He was worlds away from the sharp, sterile lines of his tech startup, where algorithms and market pressures dominated every interaction. Behind him lay a life of luxury, but he felt an increasing sense of alienation creeping in a void that no amount of wealth could fill. An unsettling emptiness gripped him, a nearly suffocating silence in a room full of noise. As he settled into a booth, he glanced around, observing the clientele, working-class folks wrapped in weathered jackets and wholesome banter. His attention ultimately landed on a young woman diligently cleaning the tables, with tired but gentle eyes filled with a fire that defied her circumstances. Maria. He could feel an inexplicable pull toward her quiet strength, a stark contrast to the relentless ambition that fueled his every waking moment. They occupied different worlds, yet hers seemed to have a warmth that his couldn't compete with. Intrigued by that resilience, he called her over, the clinking of his silverware underscoring his sudden need for connection. "What drives you?" He found himself asking, a question foreign on his lips. As she opened up about her daily struggles balancing 2 jobs while caring for her mother, sick and frail at home, Jacob felt something shift inside him. The sacrifices she made, the dreams she shoved aside, carved into her spirit with enormous weight. He listened, captivated. Couldn't people, especially those in his circle of affluent elites, learn from her? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But as Jacob considered penning an article about Maria, a feature that might entirely shift public perception and draw support for her family, he became aware of the tumult stirring within him. The very world he occupied, one of status and privilege, began to reject the notion of empathy for the low class. What would his peers think? Would they dismiss Maria and her story as trivial? That fear gnawed at him, awakening a guilt that rose like bile in his throat. He couldn't ignore it, nor the way their disdain would ripple toward him. His resolve to help Maria's family by using his resources to secure better medical care for her mother crescendoed like a ringing alarm. Back at the upscale lounge where he networked, whispers circulated behind closed doors, snide remarks about how a millionaire should behave, how they should remain detached from those who struggle below them. Inside, he was caught in an internal storm, a moral crisis unfolding where every choice felt like betrayal against the industry that built him, against the humanity he had begun to cherish anew. As he prepared for the gala, the stakes skyrocketed. Any slip of allegiance would tear him apart, either align with the shallow laughter of his wealth-driven friends or stand up for the heart-wrenching, relatable truth of Maria's existence. The thought of losing everything he'd built loomed over him while his chest tightened, refusing to let him breathe. The path ahead blurred, leaving him anxious, teetering on the edge of decision. Would he have the strength to confront that unyielding fear of losing status, or would self-interest entangle him deeper? The choice awaited him, heavy and unyielding, as he faced a future filled with uncertainty, longing, and tension that drowned out everything else. Jacob's fingers drummed restlessly on the polished surface of the diner's table. The chatter around him faded into a murmur as he wrestled with a reality he had meticulously constructed but now found stifling. The idea of helping Maria gnawed at him, a dormant flame ignited by the sheer force of her resilience. Yet, with each passing moment, he felt an equal weight pulling him back, the allure of his old life, filled with power, money, and the adulation of society's elite. As the waitress delivered his order, he forced a smile, but it felt foreign on his face. He wasn't sure if it was disgust directed at himself, or sympathy for the young woman whose story now played over and over in his mind like a haunting melody. He had started to contemplate not just monetary support or a medical plan for Maria's mother, but a complete overhaul of his own priorities. That realization unsettled him. He snapped back into the present when he noticed Maria moving about with grace amid the clamor, effortlessly transforming the diner into an inviting haven. It struck him, what if he used the same keen insights he had honed in the tech world to create something that mattered? A foundation, an outreach initiative, anything that could bring real change. But the fear of giving up his comforts, his connections, and his standing in elite circles reared its ugly head again. The tension in his gut coiled tighter as he envisioned the gala. He could almost hear the laughter echoing in the opulent hall, the gleaming chandeliers casting a lavish light over empty conversations. Would he be able to maneuver through that atmosphere, the clutches of pretense and wealth tightening around him, all the while harboring the thoughts of Maria and her reality? In that earnest diner, inspiration collided with trepidation, forcing a decision into sharp focus. Could he genuinely advocate for someone like Maria without sacrificing himself in the process? It felt like a tightrope he was not entirely sure he wanted to walk. There was an outdated idea that success hinged on being accepted by the elite. But observing Maria, he began to contemplate if redefining success might be his route to authentic happiness. He made eye contact with Maria, who was now busily wiping down a nearby booth but paused mid-action, her brow furrowed, as if sensing his internal struggle. In that fleeting moment, he caught a glimpse of her spirit, a beacon illuminating his own darkest corners. Not only did she fill her days with labor for her family, but she also emanated a sense of purpose he had long abandoned in pursuit of status. Jacob's heartbeat quickened at the thought. What if he redirected his company's resources, not just for profit, but for a cause? The aim was never about fitting in, it was about impacting lives. But the enormity of that shift paralyzed him. The whispers of his inner circle echoed again, warning of ridicule, of betrayal to his brand, of appearing failures in the eyes of the world he once so deeply revered. With those thoughts racing, he picked up his phone. His fingers hovered over the screen, contemplating a message to one of his business partners, a request to gather ideas for social outreach projects, a small step into the unknown. But his resolve faltered. Doubt began to seep in. What if he failed? What if it didn't resonate within him or with others? The weight of possibility pressed hard against him. He needed to pull together the threads of ambition, generosity, and his emerging sense of vulnerability into something cohesive. Could he dare to step into the fray? He took a deep breath and pushed his thoughts against the walls of fear that bound him. Time ticked away. He couldn't stay in this limbo forever. The moment approached when he would have to act. The decision loomed ahead, twisting his heart as doubt intermingled with determination. He had to make a choice that might irrevocably change who he was meant to be. Would he gather courage to fully embrace this new vision, or would fear continue to anchor him down? The inevitable choice simmered just beneath the surface, awaiting that moment when he would either leap or stay stranded, hovering in the shadows of his own life. And as that thought settled, the weight of everything he had chased began to feel trivial. The call to action was undeniable, demanding to be heard. He sensed it was almost time to face those who would push back harder than ever. The clash of his two worlds ready to erupt at the gala. Confidence ebbed as uncertainty raged. Would this be the night he chose purpose over prestige? Jacob felt a palpable shift within himself as he swallowed hard, the weight of his decision compressing his chest. He glanced once more at Maria, her laughter resonating amidst the clanking of dishes, the everyday joy she found in her work sharper than any anxiety gnawing at his insides. He remembered her resolve, the way she tended to her mother with grace. It was a stark contrast to the evening plans floating through his mind, superficial conversations woven within a tapestry of camaraderie that lacked genuine connection. His phone screen illuminated with the message prompt, inviting him to draft his intentions. He knew that with each passing minute, doing nothing would solidify the malaise threatening to suffocate him. The thought of drafting an email to spark change felt both exhilarating and daunting, revealing a reminder of everything he had kept at bay. He took a moment, imagining himself boldly stepping forward into the unknown, using his contacts and phobia of failure to launch an outreach initiative. What if he wrote about the possibilities that could blossom from philanthropy in a world consumed by profit? The idea ignited flickers of brightness amid his storm of insecurity, but then his inner critic surfaced, echoing around his mind. They whispered of his failure at a potential venture, the risk of derision from his peers, and their dismissive laughter ringing louder than Maria's laughter. He shifted in his seat, wrestling with the past clinging to him, a life defined by accolades, numbers, and bottom lines. A mix of fear and ambition suffused his veins, urging him forward and holding him back simultaneously. The waitress casually refilled his coffee, breaking his thoughts. She passed him a glance curious, but not judgmental, as if she could sense the maelstrom brewing behind his furrowed brow. He offered a distracted smile, realizing that the authority he so gravitated towards was tangled up in fear. Was he afraid to fail or to succeed? To soar away from the trappings of his old identity? It occurred to him, choosing to act held both profound potential and peril. Could this be the moment he harnessed the skills he had cultivated in his professional life and melded them with the urgency inspired by Maria's struggles? A pang of trepidation echoed through him. Could he genuinely transform his ambition into a source of healing, rather than focus solely on profit? His fingers began to type, hesitating. Let's brainstorm ideas for outreach projects, he wrote tentatively to his partner, feeling the tether of hesitation begin to loosen. It was a modest step, but the act of reaching for change was anything but I could trigger a ripple effect that reached far beyond his little corner of the world. That he pressed send. The decision made, yet a shiver of dread coursed through him. What if this quest for purpose only dragged him deeper into conflict? The elite he had once felt so indomitable among would undoubtedly recoil. He could almost hear their criticisms now. How frivolous, how embarrassing it would be to divert from their established norms. As he leaned back in the booth, he felt a burgeoning excitement, unfurling like petals in the sun. The chase was changing, a different kind of chase, one enriched with vulnerability and authenticity. Yet, buried beneath that excitement was a gnawing question. Would he have the courage to face this new path, especially when confronted by those who would fiercely oppose? The circle of his elite existence could only grow narrower, sharper, and more oppressive in their disdain for anyone deviating from the status quo. The diner, once a mere gathering of strangers, transformed into a crucible, the essence of hope and uncertainty clashing starkly against the backdrop of his elitist past. He couldn't afford to falter now. The stakes were surging higher, and his past was pushing back with a pressure that could crush him. As Jacob stared at the jarring reflections across the diner windows, the ever-present battle between light and shadow, a sharp realization set in. He had ignited a wake of possibilities far broader than himself. Each step would demand clarity. Every interaction would be a test. He felt the impending storm of his two vastly different realities brewing, prepared to collide. What he didn't yet grasp was that the real challenge awaited on the horizon, ready to confront him face to face. The moment had come to brace himself for the inevitable confrontation with those who had dominated his past. Would he weather that storm or retreat into the shadows once again? Jacob left the diner, the brisk evening air a sharp contrast to the warmth inside. He could feel the pulse of the city around him, every streetlight casting long shadows that mirrored his swirling thoughts. The weight of his decision pressed heavily on his chest, but there was an unexpected lightness in his step as he navigated homeward. The flicker of hope ignited from within urged him to consider, in earnest, the implications of his outreach plans. At one point, he paused at the corner, the familiar setting of his once carefree life stretching before him. The lights from the buildings glimmered, yet for the first time, their allure felt somewhat hollow. He was no longer just a spectator, but a participant on the fringes of a world that demanded authenticity. He understood he had work ahead of him, but he did not yet know the scope of the journey that lay before him. Settling into the cramped space of his modest apartment, he sparked his laptop and opened a blank document. Fresh ideas bubbled within him, a series of initiatives anchored not in profit, but in personal stories. Their rawness struck a chord deep inside. Maria's dedication to her mother rushed back to him. He wanted to reflect that emotion in his outreach, to share the struggles of human experience that so often got lost in the corporate shuffle. Yet as he typed, the self-doubt descended like a fog. What if no one cared? What if his efforts were met with ridicule? The relentless voice of criticism clawed at the edges of his mind again. Each keystroke felt heavy, laden with the memories of board meetings and relentless competition. He took a deep breath, pushing against the confines of that old identity suffocating him. Instead of retreating, he challenged himself. What if vulnerability became his strength? The corporate world had encouraged masks, each polished persona a defense against reality. Could he step into the light and own his narrative? He wrote quickly, feverishly, letting his thoughts tumble onto the page. As I step away from profit-focused metrics, he typed, I find myself drawn toward how we can weave our experiences into something meaningful. I want a partner not just for funding, but for collaboration that honors the stories behind the numbers. The intensity of this mission surged in him. This wasn't just about philanthropy. It was about weaving a tapestry of shared humanity, about sharing his voice in a landscape often occupied by the loudest. He felt a surge of purpose each time he hit save the files, building like bricks in a new foundation he was creating. The next day, he reached out to a few local organizations known for their community engagement. His emails were clear, infused with the breath of authenticity he longed for. By the afternoon, he received replies, some encouraging, some skeptical, yet each lay a stepping stone toward his unknown future. As the day folded into night, he felt a sense of connection brewing. The initial excitement had morphed into a tangible energy. Conversations that once revolved around trivialities were becoming rich with potential and vulnerability. There was still much to navigate, but the obstacles ahead appeared less insurmountable now. Yet each interchange brought a wave of adrenaline as well. With every new correspondent, there was a lingering dread. There would be those who dismissed him, who would sit behind their polished desks in tailored suits and question the validity of his new ambitions. Jacob knew the discomfort that came from facing disapproval, especially from those who had once embraced the worst aspects of his former self. As he closed his laptop that night, a knock interrupted his thoughts. It was his neighbor, a single mother struggling to keep her lights on, who often seemed to hover at the brink of despair. In that moment, he saw not just his own reflection, but the plight of countless others, the resilience that could be scaffolded through even the smallest acts of kindness. "What is your plan?" she asked, her voice trembling but determined. He hesitated. The reality of his commitment to his new path collided with the pressing need of the person before him. Jacob realized that he might just have to confront those who once held power over him sooner than he anticipated. Would he stand firm, or allow the whispers from his past to render him immobile? With renewed resolve, Jacob took a deep breath and stepped forward, aware that the upcoming conversations would test his resolve and integrity in ways he was not ready for. The transition from his past to a purpose-driven future was just beginning, but a storm loomed overhead, brewing tension in his heart. The moment had come for clarity and confrontation, and it felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Would he be able to rise above the criticisms he feared, or would he falter when it mattered most? Jacob stood in the doorway of his apartment, the cool air curling around him as he focused on his neighbor's question. The weight of her need and his plans collided, pulsing through him like a warning signal. He could feel the tremor in her voice, a resonance of desperate hope that tugged at him. "I want to." He searched for the right words, feeling their frailty beneath the weight of their intent. "I want to help people, create real connections through my work." He watched her face, strained with burdens unknown to him. Here was a stark reminder of why he'd chosen this new path. But could he truly provide the support she needed? A clarity settled in, igniting a sense of urgency within him. "I could offer help with your bills," he said quietly, but with certainty. "And we can figure out ways to share your story. It might resonate with others." She blinked at him, surprise igniting her expression. The moment hung heavily, fraught with unspoken fears and new possibilities. They both knew the fragility of kindness in a world often overshadowed by indifference. "I can't ask you for that," she stammered, her pride pushing against the desperation. "Sometimes asking for help is the bravest thing you can do," he stated, the words feeling suddenly profound. Jacob didn't fully understand that he was battling with himself, a man wrestling against the remnants of his corporate armor. What he had thought was strength, self-reliance, and individualism was now a veneer masking vulnerability. After their conversation, Jacob returned to the glow of his laptop, the night stretching endlessly ahead of him. Her hesitation echoed in his mind, a blend of shame and gratitude playing on repeat. He needed to bring that same authenticity into his outreach, to foster a space where asking for help wasn't shrouded in stigma. He opened his document once more, inspired by the notion that vulnerability could connect rather than isolate. His mission transformed in that moment. He mapped out ideas for workshops, not solely centered on financial seminars, but around communal storytelling sessions, platforms for sharing life narratives, bolstering genuine connections among diverse individuals. Each name that made it to his list was a facet of humanity he'd longed to highlight, stories that could alter the contours of his city, perhaps even the world. But with every burst of creativity came the gnawing doubts, whispering yet again. Who would come? Would anyone truly care about the stories? They d want to minimize them. They d tried to reduce Jacob to numbers once, too. Facing this reality felt like looking into a darkened room filled with echoes of laughter and applause that were just out of reach. He drafted strategies for outreach. Each new email filled him with anticipation, but also trepidation. The stakes felt higher now. Instead of fearing rejection, he decided he would lean into it. After all, his failures would serve as teaching moments for both him and those he aimed to reach. A stirring recognition emerged that failure and vulnerability could, in fact, fortify his aspirations, providing a raw yet resolute foundation. Later, as he prepared for bed, the weight of the day pressed into his bones. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, forcing himself to acknowledge who he was becoming. He no longer craved others' validation. He needed to validate himself first. The feeling was new, but intoxicating. He could finally meet critics, face them armed with his renewed commitments and principles. It was time to reach out once more to local businesses, community leaders, anyone who might share this vision rooted in connection and discernment. With a burst of determination, he jotted down names and ideas, thrilling at the prospect of what lay ahead. He was no longer weaving just his narrative. He was crafting a shared story, a tapestry waiting for its first thread. But as Jacob settled into bed, anticipation mingled with dread. The journey was only beginning, and he could feel the storm of confrontation gathering with every step he took toward clarity. In the distance, he heard laughter and shouts, the city alive around him, a reminder of the path waiting to unfold. How many more corners would he have to turn before he found his true self? Would he be able to face the formidable critics of his past once their presence shadowed him again? Jacob awoke the next morning to the sharp light filtering through his window, stirring from restless dreams that were echoes of uncertainty. He had built a fragile hope, and it felt as though the world outside was both a blessing and a burden. As sunlight streamed into his bedroom, illuminating the shadows of doubt, he resolved not to let fear anchor his ambitions any longer. Today was pivotal. With each interaction, he would need to craft a narrative, perhaps not just for himself, but for someone else waiting to be heard. He grabbed his notebook, the marks of previous brainstorming sessions reflecting ideas and fears intertwined. Among those scribbles, he locked onto something solid: the importance of authentic connections, a bedrock for his outreach that he set out, intent on visiting local businesses that embodied community values. On foot, he traversed streets where memories of corporate lives felt distant and fresh ideas circled in the air. What had once been a daily route filled with monotonous concierge endeavors now brimmed with possibility. As he approached the first cafe, a small establishment with a rustic charm, he noticed a handwritten sign that read, "Open. Bring your story." Intrigued, he stepped inside to find warm smiles amidst the aroma of brewed coffee. The owner, a woman in her 40s with weary yet kind eyes, looked up as he entered. "How can I help you?" she asked, her voice melodious and welcoming. "I'm Jacob," he began, clarity coating his words with intent. "I'm trying to connect with the community, to create a platform for sharing our stories. I believe everyone has a voice worth hearing." He felt an emboldened crack in his typical restrained demeanor, as if he were standing naked before the very essence of connection he sought. "Stories, huh?" she mused, her brow furrowing in thought. "I've got plenty. People come here looking for more than just coffee. They come for the company. Maybe we can do something together." A thrill ran through Jacob. The cafe, with its eclectic patrons and slice-of-life ambience, felt alive with potential. They discussed collaborating on storytelling sessions, a place where vulnerability would be the currency exchanged for solidarity. With each enthusiastic nod from the owner, Jacob could feel the tentative threads of his vision weaving itself into reality as he left. Invigorated by their conversation, a thought wormed its way into his mind, a gnawing question laced with anxiety. What if the stories he gathered were too raw, too real for the people around him? Would vulnerability invite judgment or understanding? It was a dilemma he couldn't shake. What would happen if his own vulnerability was laid bare? If he had to confront his past while opening others up to theirs? Later that afternoon, he found himself in a local park, a place where children's laughter mixed with life's fleeting moments. Sitting on a bench, he opened his notebook, yet instead of writing down ideas, his fingers danced over phrases that divulged his internal struggles. For the first time, he laid his thoughts bare, wanting to grapple with the dissonance between his aspirations and lingering self-doubt. Could he be the catalyst for others? Could he invite them to share their vulnerabilities and, in turn, feel secure enough to examine his own? The tension of this realization made him pause. There was a weight in being human, one that came with acknowledging personal demons. Suddenly, a man walking his dog paused, catching a glimpse of Jacob's open notebook. "What is that you're working on?" The man asked, curiosity alight in his eyes. Jacob's pulse quickened. This was the moment, the chance to share, to test the boundaries of his newfound resolve. "I'm trying to create a space for stories, real stories. Would you be interested in sharing yours?" As the man considered, curiosity turned into contemplation, and Jacob felt a rush of exhilaration mixed with fear. Each interaction felt like a leap into the unknown, potentially igniting camaraderie or pushing him deeper into the shadows of self-doubt. Could he dare to press on, to make this aspiration real? The answer eluded him, hanging in the balance just like the fleeting autumn leaves swirling around his feet. As he watched them dance, he felt the weight of his journey swell within him. What awaited him wasn't his past, but the present, still unwritten. But what lingered in the periphery was an unsettling thought. He couldn't ignore that soon enough, the question of his critics and their harsh judgments would resurface. Each conversation would bring him one step closer to that confrontation. The time had come to face those lingering shadows once and for all. Jacob lingered on the park bench, the sun dipping lower as shadows lengthened. The man with the dog sauntered away, his curious gaze still lingering like an unfinished sentence. Jacob's heart raced at the thought of pursuing the conversation, but just as quickly, a wave of self-doubt crashed over him. What if he wasn't worthy of eliciting stories? Or worse, what if his own attempts to connect only revealed how unsteady his footing truly was? He closed his notebook, deliberating the weight of his intentions. To craft a narrative was not merely a challenge of storytelling. It was a confrontation of his identity. In his desire for connection, there lay the very real risk of exposure, the risk that he was still the doubt-riddled man whom he so desperately wished to transform. Yet, he had taken a step forward with that cafe owner. What if this quest could extend beyond gathering tales to revealing the interconnected tapestry of human experience? This thought ignited a flicker of resolve within him. Why not delve deeper into his own narrative as he facilitated others? Perhaps vulnerability had a dual purpose. It could cultivate empathy and inspire others to unveil their truths. As the sun began to sink below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Jacob returned home with vigor. Set on exploring this concept of connected storytelling, he gathered his materials, his notebook, some pens, and a list of the local businesses he had jotted down during his venture. He began drafting a plan, structured gatherings where stories could be shared in a safe space. With each word crafted, he felt the pulse of his ambition throb stronger, resurrecting dreams long buried beneath concerns of inadequacy. The next morning, Jacob arrived early at the cafe, eager to solidify their plan. The warm ambience welcomed him, and as customers filtered in, he felt a hum of potential. He and the owner discussed formats for the storytelling sessions, balancing structure with the organic flow of discussion. They brainstormed ideas that would make sharing feel like an opportunity instead of a chore. Yet, amid the excitement, Jacob felt the insistent whispers of insecurity. What if people didn't show up? What if they were dismissive, or, worse, uninterested? He took a moment to collect himself, grounding his thoughts. This initiative wasn't an evaluation of his worth, but an act of connection with whatever came of it. As he left the cafe that day, a decision wedged itself into the forefront of his mind. He would lead by example. He resolved to share his own story, the raw, unfiltered vulnerabilities he had kept hidden. That, he realized, could break down barriers not just for himself, but for others as well. After all, if he sought authenticity from them, he owed it to himself to offer the same. However, when he confronted the weight of revealing his truth, a familiar dread twisted in his stomach. How much would he expose? Would his past be met with understanding or apathy? The prospect of opening up ignited both fear and a spark of liberation, leaving him in a tug-of-war with his emotions. That as he settled into his evening, Jacob contemplated his next move. He yearned to nurture a supportive circle where vulnerability thrived. He envisioned a dinner table piled high with stories, laughter mingling with shared tears. But with the daunting prospect of stepping into his own limelight came the nagging question of whether his past could indeed become a bridge or merely a barrier. The path before him remained thick with uncertainty, but he could feel the stirring of a call to action, simple in its essence, yet powerful in its potential. Tomorrow, he would plunge into the heart of his fears. It was time to find someone willing to listen, to acknowledge the fractures of his past. The endeavor ahead felt inevitable. As he turned off the lights, Jacob was left with one thought floating in the air. Could he stand before the audience of his own making and take the first steps toward genuine connection? The moment of truth stared back at him, waiting for his response. As dawn broke, Jacob rose with a mixture of anticipation and dread coiling within him. Today marked the day he would invite someone into the depths of his past, a leap into vulnerability he had long avoided. He glanced at his reflection in the mirror, focusing on the man staring back at him. Was this the brave storyteller he aspired to be, or was he still ensnared by his insecurities? He dressed quickly, his mind racing through potential conversations, each one a litany of uncertainties. The decision to share his story ignited a fierce desire to step outside himself, yet the shackles of fear clung tight. What if he faltered under the weight of his memories? Would his experience resonate, or would it fall flat, met with silence instead of empathy? His path led him back to the cafe, the familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the crisp morning air. Each step felt monumental, a reminder of his commitment to this journey. As he entered the cafe, he noticed a woman seated at a corner table, her fingers tracing the rim of a coffee cup, lost in thought. Jacob recognized her, a barista who had shared fleeting moments of conversation with him, her eyes always brimming with kindness. "Hey," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, though it felt heavy with meaning. "Could I join you?" She looked up, surprise flashing across her face before melting into a warm smile. "Of course. I was hoping to see you again." They exchanged pleasantries as he settled across from her. Yet, Jacob's heart pounded relentlessly. He felt the pull of vulnerability surrounding the space between them, an inviting abyss. "Actually," he began, the words hanging in the air like an unspoken promise, "I'd like to share something personal. It might help to explain why I want to create this storytelling space." Her expression shifted, curiosity evident in her eyes. "I'm listening." With a deep breath, Jacob started to unravel his story, the confusion of his childhood, the shadows of neglect, the bridges burned through fear of judgment. As he spoke, each revelation felt like casting off chains that had long constrained him. The barista didn't lose focus or shy away from his revelations. Instead, she leaned in, her presence steadying as he described his search for connection and his yearning to help others articulate their own struggles. He sensed the warmth of her understanding enveloping him, wrapping him in a cocoon of acceptance. However, as he approached the moment of his most painful truth, the loss of those he loved, an unsettling hollow expanded within him. The words threatened to choke him, and he hesitated, the tipping point of his emotional unveiling just within reach. Would revealing this core of his anguish invite connection or push her away? "Jacob, you don't have to share anything you're not ready to," she urged, her voice a gentle reminder that vulnerability paced hand in hand with safety. The struggle raged inside. Part of him longed to shield himself from any potential judgment. The other part yearned to connect through the rawness of his experience. "No," he managed to say, "I need to express this." And as he did, the atmosphere shifted. The cafe around them blurred into insignificance, time lost meaning as he unveiled himself piece by piece. He revealed the depths of his pain, his struggles, and, finally, the hope that had emerged from despair. Each word that poured from him felt empowering, lighting a path forward. When he finished speaking, silence blanketed the table, charged with understanding. The barista leaned back, a thoughtful look in her eyes, and what emerged next surprised Jacob. "Thank you for trusting me with that," she said quietly. "It takes immense strength to own your story like that. I'd love to help you with your gatherings." His heart raced, mixing disbelief with elation. Had he really been accepted? More than that, had his honesty opened a door for collaboration? As they continued to talk, an idea began stirring within Jacob. This was just the beginning. Today, through their exchange, he had realized that connection could emerge even in the most uncomfortable of revelations. With each new agreement and shared enthusiasm, he sensed the collective power of human stories growing stronger. Yet, beneath the exhilaration, Jacob grappled with a creeping thought. How many more stories lay hidden, waiting to be unearthed? What unique perspectives and buried truths might he encounter as he delved deeper into the lives of others? As he prepared to leave, with an invitation to share more stories, a precursor to building his first gathering, he felt a tremor of excitement intertwined with a deep fear. The path ahead was still riddled with uncertainty, but he could sense he was no longer alone in the journey. Standing at the edge of this new chapter, one question lingered in his mind, intensifying the pulse of what was to come. How far would he be willing to go to uncover the heart of the rare stories out there? And could he truly prepare himself for the revelations that awaited him? The hours following their conversation in the cafe unfolded with a surreal rhythm. Jacob felt as if he were floating just above the weight of his responsibilities and expectations. Ideas swirled in his mind how to create a space not just for storytelling, but for healing and connection, a sanctuary where vulnerability became a shared strength. Yet, beneath the surface of his budding excitement lay an undercurrent of anxiety. Would he have what it took to make it happen? The following morning, the sunlight streamed through his apartment window, scattering golden rays across his work desk, where his notebook lay open. Handwritten notes covered the pages, thoughts about themes, potential topics, and names of people who might want to contribute. He hesitated, hand poised over his pen. Could he invite others to share their own intimate stories, something he had only just traversed himself? The risk felt monumental. With a deep breath, Jacob picked up the pen and wrote, "Real stories, real connections." The title felt heavy with promise, echoing the authenticity he sought to cultivate. Writing down that title ignited a spark. Perhaps he could truly shape this vision into reality. But, uncertain how to begin, he wondered if he should start with a smaller gathering and experiment where he could test the waters of vulnerability. Jacob decided to revisit the cafe, hoping to find the barista who had ignited this transformative journey. She sat at the same table, a beacon of encouragement amidst the ambient noise of clinking cups and spirited conversations. As she caught his eye, she smiled, and he felt the warmth of her support bolster his resolve. "Hey, I've been thinking about what we talked about," he said, excitement seeping into his tone. "I want to start a small gathering, just to test the waters and see how it goes. I'd love your input, maybe even your help." Her eyes lit up with enthusiasm, but Jacob saw a flicker of concern. "Are you sure you're ready for that? It might feel overwhelming." He hesitated, her question striking a chord of truth in him. "I think I am. After sharing yesterday, I feel like, I want to give others a chance to feel that too, to tell their stories. But I also need guidance. I'm scared of messing things up." The barista leaned forward, her elbows resting on the table, imbued with confidence. "You're not alone in that fear," she affirmed. "I'm sure many people are nervous about sharing their truths. You need to create a safe space where they feel heard." Jacob nodded, a spark of determination igniting within him. "What if we have some structure? Maybe we could start with some prompts, guide them gently towards their stories. It can help create an atmosphere of trust." "Exactly. You're already on the right track," she encouraged, her voice filled with belief. "But remember, it needs to be authentic. If you share your journey at the beginning, it might help others open up." The suggestion hit him, both thrilling and daunting. His truth laid bare again, exposed for others to see. "Right. I'd be sharing a part of myself all over again, wouldn't I? But you're a storyteller now," she replied. "It's a part of your journey. People connect with authenticity." Jacob's heart raced at the idea, battling fear and exhilaration within. Could he really dive back into those depths? What if his story was far too personal, too painful? "With your guidance, I can take that leap," he admitted, a sense of clarity emerging. He sensed he could transform that fear into fuel for change. As they plotted out a framework, Jacob felt the pieces coming together. The gathering would become a collage of shared experiences. Yet, an underlying anxiety twisted at his thoughts. What if he didn't resonate as he hoped? What if his past still clung to him, weighing him down instead of lifting the collective spirit he sought to harness? The fog cleared as they walked through their plans. Jacob slowly recognizing that while he could not predict every outcome, he could prepare for both his own journey and the stories waiting to be unveiled. The next few days passed with Jacob fully immersed in his ideas, drafting invitations with the confidence of someone embarking on a major life change. But beneath that layer of enthusiasm festered an unsettling nagging thought: what if the stories revealed were too much for him to bear? As he stood at the metaphorical edge of his path, ready to step forward, he sensed the vastness of what lay ahead. The moments of truth would demand more than he could anticipate, and the courage required loomed larger than ever. What awaited him among the tales of others? How would these shared experiences challenge his own narrative? In the thrumming heart of this project, Jacob realized he had to brace himself for whatever revelations these connections might bring. The pivotal moment approached. Could he truly navigate the emotional landscapes that lay ahead, not merely as a spectator, but as a participant willing to engage with the raw realities of others? The time had come to confront what he may discover not just within the stories he would hear, but within himself. Jacob stood on the steps of the cafe, taking a moment to absorb the vibrant life teeming around him. It was an ordinary day, yet the air crackled with the extraordinary potential of uncharted connections. He had pledged to share his story among many others, a venture that required more courage than he previously believed he possessed. As he stepped inside, his resolve steadied. The barista, now a partner in his journey, smiled warmly at him from the counter. Today was the day they would initiate their first gathering, an experience they hoped would transform not only their lives, but also those of others seeking a voice. With every table occupied, the cafe buzzed with a mix of anticipation and nervous energy. Jacob watched as guests trickled in, faces filled with uncertainty and curiosity. It suddenly hit him how much he was asking of them, a chance to lay bare their innermost thoughts while still wrestling with his own lingering fears. Taking a deep breath, he introduced himself to the gathering. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice unwavering yet filled with warmth. "I know sharing personal stories can be daunting, which is why I've chosen to lead off with my own." He scanned the room for familiar, encouraging faces, including the barista, who nodded reassuringly as he recounted his journey, his upbringing, his previous embodiment of success devoid of true connection, and his new mission to help create a space for stories. A shift enveloped the room. He embraced the vulnerability in his voice, defining his struggles, intertwined with moments of anger and heartache, and allowing silence to reveal the poignancy in his narrative. He could feel the atmosphere change as he spoke. The initial tension transformed into a palpable sense of understanding. This wasn't merely storytelling, it was a communion of genuine emotions, raw and unfiltered. As he concluded, he opened the floor to others. One by one, guests began to share their own experiences, weaving a tapestry of life experiences rich with struggles and triumphs. Laughter spilled alongside tears, creating an intoxicating blend of catharsis. In those moments, Jacob felt joy breaking through the barriers he had built, each story reinforcing the undeniable complexity of the human experience. The more they shared, the more Jacob realized he was navigating a transformative territory, both for himself and for those around him. What had started as a quest for connection had shifted into a mission of healing, not just for others, but also for a hollowed-out version of himself he had kept buried. When the gathering concluded, an unexpected surge of exhilaration coursed through Jacob. They had wrapped up not just a session, but a collective, transformative moment, one that validated the power of sharing. As they exchanged goodbyes and thank yous, Jacob felt like he was standing at a threshold, a marker of personal achievement that urged him forward. His emotional landscape had shifted, solidifying a newfound confidence that had taken shape amid shared vulnerabilities. He recognized how vulnerability could fortify rather than weaken, weaving intricate ties that bound human experiences together. In the weeks that followed, each storytelling session continued to grow. Jacob didn't just lead. He engaged, fostering an environment where vulnerability ignited courage in others. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Local businesses reached out, seeking ways to sponsor their newfound initiative, empowering others to share their truths by highlighting stories that mattered. Recognition came from unexpected places. A community newsletter featured their gatherings, calling Jacob's initiative a breath of fresh air. The validation ignited a flame within him. He no longer found himself as a man grappling with insecurity, but as a leader carving out pathways for the stories often silenced beneath layers of daily life. As he concluded another gathering one evening, the barista approached him. "You've done something amazing here," she acknowledged, her gaze steady. "You've turned fear into belonging." Jacob smiled, accepting the affirmation. "This wasn't just about me. It's your support that made this happen," he replied, gratitude spilling from his voice. He realized at that moment he had not only achieved personal growth, but had established something far greater, a community where every voice counts, including his. Looking out across the gathering space, increasingly filled with laughter and shared stories, Jacob recognized and acknowledged the quiet, yet powerful satisfaction swelling within him. He was now someone who had achieved more than personal success or wealth. He conquered depths of connection, integrity, and understanding both of himself and of the world around him. Fulfilling his calling, Jacob stepped deeper into his journey, envisioning the future not just as a passage of professional gravitas, but as a platform for real human connection. For the first time, he felt anchored by his purpose, a manifestation of the vulnerabilities he once feared, now transformed into an incandescent drive to share the voices that needed to be heard. Before closing the doors that evening, he gazed at the flickering lights of the city outside, triumphant in the reflection of who he had become, a champion of storytelling and resilience. The uncertainty that once shrouded his life had lifted, revealing a clear, empowering path forward. Now was the time to share this journey, this calling, with the world. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and boost these important conversations. Comment below with your reactions and theories about what you've heard. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. You need to be part of this community that values personal growth and authentic stories.